I don't regret hating them. I only regret not saying this sooner. That chilling, haunting confession comes from Helen Mirren, a woman who has reached the heights of glory but has also been plunged into deep suffering by the very men she once trusted as her allies. At 80 years old, with nothing left to hide, Helen has boldly swung open the dusty backstage door of Hollywood and bravely named the 5 men she despises most for their betrayal, deceit, manipulation, and the truths that the audience has never heard before. But why does a woman like Helen harbor such deep resentment, and what has forced her to stay silent for so many decades? The first name she reveals is the dark monster of Hollywood. Not everyone born to be a queen lives a queen's life. Helen Mirren, a name synonymous with regal beauty, sharp intelligence, and one of the greatest actresses of all time, once had to crawl through a world power column in a ruthless game just to earn her place. She was born on July 26, 1945, into a working-class immigrant family in England and was once forbidden by her father to pursue acting because he believed Hollywood was a dirty place for wayward girls. But that little girl, with a fierce survival instinct and bright eyes, shattered every stereotype and broke through the iron gates of the film empire until she stood tall with an Oscar in hand. But behind the spotlight lies a shattered life filled with false love, brutal handshakes, and locked rooms where she was forced to comply or leave the industry. Helen was once considered not sensual enough to be a star until her very body was used to promote films, gracing magazine covers and igniting public desire. There were times Helen wanted to give it all up. The nights she cried in hotel bathrooms after being pressured by directors to shoot a nude scene. That wasn't in the contract. But instead of backing down, she gritted her teeth and rose up, becoming the rebellious icon that Hollywood could never tame. Helen Mirren once said, "I am not a princess. I am a warrior survivor among a pack of wolves disguised as producers." And today, at 80 years old, when fame doesn't matter anymore, she has named the 5 men she hates and despises most. Those who once tried to turn her into a puppet. Which faces made it onto that blacklist? And why does each mention still make your blood boil to this day? Prepare yourself, as you are about to embark on a journey that Hollywood never wanted you to know the truth. A Harvey Weinstein, the man who instilled fear through power. I will never forget his eyes. Not because they were lustful, but Hollywood never wanted you to know the truth. A Harvey Weinstein, a man who created fear through power. I will never forget his eyes. Not because they were lustful, but because they were empty. Empty like a cave created to swallow the souls of women. That year, Helen walked into the audition room, a big project, a life-changing opportunity. But what she was waiting for wasn't a director with a script. It was a large, strong man slouched in a chair, holding a glass of wine. His smile dirtier than the audition chair itself. He said, "Helen, you have talent," but only holding a glass of wine. His smile dirtier than the casting couch. He said, "Helen, you have talent, but just having talent isn't enough in Hollywood. You need to be flexible." When she refused, he replied with a smirk and said, "You'll be back when you realize you can't climb up without a ladder." The next day, the script disappeared. Her agent's calls were continuously cut off. Doors that were once open suddenly slammed shut like a curse. From that moment on, Helen understood that she wasn't just fighting for art. She was battling against an empire built on sex and fear. I don't hate him just for what he did to me. I hate him for what he did to hundreds of other women. Women too scared to speak up. And yes, Harvey isn't just the most hated man. He is the spark that ignited the flame of anger that had been smoldering in Helen Mirren for 40 years. The second man, the one whom Helen once looked straight in the face and said, "I will never forgive you, even after you die. Don't look away. The storm has just begun." 2. Liam Neeson, the greatest liar I ever loved. Some betray with a knife. You betrayed me with a smile. That's all Helen said when asked about Liam Neeson, the man she once believed they would walk hand in hand through life together. They met in the early 1980s, both at the peak of their careers. Passionate love with no regrets. Helen said, "I loved him so much that I would give up my acting career if he needed me to." And behind the scenes, they always held hands, looking at each other with eyes full of promise. But behind those passionate kisses were late-night calls that Helen wasn't allowed to answer. Solo business trips turned out to be anything but lonely. One time, Helen smelled a strange perfume on the pillow. Another time, she found a lipstick mark on Liam's shirt collar. But she told herself that it was just a smudge, just a mistake, until one winter afternoon in London, she came home earlier than expected and found Liam there with a woman 20 years younger, wearing the very shirt that Helen had ironed that morning. The girl looked at her without a care in the world. Liam stood up, sighed, and simply said, "Helen, I'm sorry you had to find out the truth this way. This way, the most brutal, cold way, with no explanation, no remorse, just an apology for her seeing it, not an apology for his actions." Helen said nothing. She walked away, never looking back. From that day on, she sealed off all her emotions, never looked back. From that day on, she locked away all her emotions. No love, no trust, no one allowed to be close for nearly a decade. He didn't kill me, but he made me lose myself for 9 years. Liam was a tear bleeding in her heart, the wound of a woman who loved deeply, completely trusting and brutally crushed. But the third man didn't just betray Helen in love. He betrayed her in front of the whole world on live television. The next story was a knife witnessed by millions. Are you ready? Because Helen is far from done. 3. Robert Redford, the backstabber on live television. No closed doors, no shadows. Robert Redford betrayed Helen Mirren right on stage in front of millions by using what Hollywood considers sacred, the honor of an introduction. It was the prestigious BAFTA Award in 1995. Helen was nominated. Redford was chosen to announce it. They used to be colleagues, even friends, or so she thought. But when he stepped up to the podium, Redford smiled, looked at Helen and said, "No one acts like Helen Mirren. She always makes you believe that middle-aged women can still be alluring when needed." It sounds harmless, but it was a hidden dagger, reducing Helen to a conditional sex symbol accepted at her age. Instead of honoring her as a powerful artist, the whole room laughed. Helen did not. She sat there, cold as ice, lips pressed tightly, realizing that sometimes those who stab you don't need knives. They use praise mixed with belittlement. I hate him not for a single remark, but because he chose the exact moment I needed support to pull me down. For Helen, he embodies the most dangerous type of man, soft on the outside, but driven by a belief system that keeps women forever buried beneath a veneer of false praise. The fourth man is about to be revealed. And this time, he is neither an actor nor a lover. He was Helen's spiritual father, a figure she completely respected until he used her as a pawn to protect his own power. Fourth, Peter Brook, the mentor who turned me into a shield for his honor, not a lover, not a co-star, not an enemy. Peter Brook, one of the greatest stage directors of the 20th century, was someone Helen once revered as a father. He discovered a young Helen, taking her from local stages to the spotlight of the Royal Shakespeare Company. I used to think I was the luckiest student in the world. But then a scandal broke out. A female actor in the troupe accused Peter Brook of abuse, coercion, and inappropriate behavior backstage. The management called for an investigation. The media surrounded, and Peter did the unimaginable. He publicly named Helen as living proof of his integrity. Women forever buried beneath a layer of false praise. The fourth man is soon to be revealed. And this time, he's not an actor, not a lover. He was Helen's spiritual father, a figure she completely revered until he used her as a pawn to protect his own power. Fourth, Peter Brook, the mentor who turned me into a shield for his honor. Not a lover, not a co-star, not an enemy. Peter Brook, one of the greatest theater directors of the 20th century, was someone Helen once honored like a father. He discovered a young Helen, bringing her from local stages to the spotlight of the Royal Shakespeare Company. I once thought I was the luckiest student in the world. But then a scandal broke. Hooray! Female actor in the troupe accused Peter Brook of abuse, coercion, and inappropriate behavior backstage. The management called for an investigation. The media surrounded, and Peter did the unthinkable. He publicly named Helen as a living testament to his integrity. Helen is the perfect example. I worked with her for decades, and nothing inappropriate ever happened. That statement was printed in the newspapers, broadcast on TV, turning Helen from an artist into a shield against the scandal. No one asked if she agreed. No one asked if she knew anything about the other victims. I wasn't chosen to be his spokesperson. I was forced. And if she had said otherwise, her entire career would be buried in the mud. Helen stayed silent until Peter Brook passed away. Then, she finally spoke up. I knew something was wrong, but I was scared. And I still hate him. Not because he's a monster, but because he saw me as a ticket to freedom. There's no betrayal more painful than being exploited by someone you once called a mentor to clean up their image. Helen Mirren does not forgive? Never. In the case of Mel Gibson, the man who burned down everything I ever stood for. I once thought I could hate someone for personal reasons, but there are some people I hate because they pose a threat to the very world I want to leave behind. Those are Helen Mirren's words about Mel Gibson. The music. It's not because he hurt her, not because they were lovers, co-stars, or even rivals, but because of what he publicly said, publicly did, and publicly spread throughout his career. The misogynistic words, the recorded slurs, the violent outbursts in a domestic context. To me, Mel Gibson is not an artist. He is a ticking time bomb no one dares to defuse. In 2006, when Mel was arrested for drunk driving and shouted anti-Semitic slurs at the police, Hollywood was shaken. However, Helen was so furious that she publicly refused to participate in any projects involving Mel Gibson, even if it meant giving up a once-in-a-lifetime role. I don't want to act alongside a man who can scream at his girlfriend that she deserves to be raped by a group of racist people. Not out of personal hatred, but for principle. Helen Mirren despises Mel Gibson. Not for what he did to her, but because he symbolizes the worst of the industry discrimination, abuse, and corrupt power. And it was the men in their 80s that finally pushed Helen Mirren to break her silence. Who do you think she hates the most? And do you believe that the woman once celebrated as the Queen of England on screen has truly lived a life of betrayal? Like a maid trapped in a cold steel palace. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Helen reveals the only woman who ever made her cry out of anger. Hot music. Hot. Music. Hot. Hot. Hot music. Hot. Music.